Good morning, listeners. Welcome to the most recent in a quarterly series of letting surgeries from HFIS, the letting agent helpline. It's good to see so many of you join us again. Just to give you a little bit of a reminder, HFIS is part of the Hamilton Fraser Group. It's something we'll come on to later, because one of the things that we find particularly useful with our lettings advice service is that we've also got access to a lot of experts across the Hamilton Fraser Group of companies, particularly landlord action when it comes to things around serving notice, eviction, possession proceedings, and also property redress scheme when it comes to dealing with consumer complaints, and sadly when sometimes things go a little bit wrong. So just to give you a little bit of an overview, I'm Mike Morgan. I'm the HFIS team leader. I'm a lawyer by profession, but specialise in alternative dispute resolution and ideally prevention rather than cure. So that's why I'm quite passionate about our lettings advice service, doing what we can to help people get it right from the beginning and not have to suffer the pain of dealing with things when they go wrong. We talked about experts, and I'm joined today by two of our advisors, Julie Ford and Dale James. Julie, would you like to say a few words about yourself? Just having a little bit of a technical.
There we go. The wonders of modern technology. Hi, my name is Julie Ford. I've got 28 years experience in the private rented sector. I started as a letting agent and property manager, or maybe 100 years ago now. And then I moved into the dark side and was a housing and homeless law specialist for the Citizens Advice for 6 years. And now I operate as a consultant to the industry, obviously the property redress scheme, and here as an advisor for Hamilton Fraser.
Excellent. And we're also joined by Dale James. Dale's joining us from Wales. Unfortunately, we can't get Dale on video, but we do have him with us. You can see him on the screen there, so we know he's real. Yep. We know what he looks like. So a few words about yourself, Dale.
Hi everybody. I've spoken to a lot of you on the phone over the past couple of years. What's my background? I'm basically 34 years in the lettings industry. I can't believe it, and still sane. And then 6 years of presenting training courses, mainly in Wales, but also in southwest of England. And now one of the HFIS advisors. I'm glad to see everyone here today. And I'm speaking to you from sunny Wales.
Excellent. Thanks, Dale. So what we were going to do today was go through some of the top inquiries that we're receiving on the helpline at the moment. Now, we're obviously all very aware of the recent news about the poor little boy that died as a result of damp and mould in a tenancy property. We do get a lot of inquiries coming into the helpline, obviously now more so than ever, to deal with damp and mould. I think it's worth highlighting before we get too involved in it, though. It's worth just remembering that there's, I think, probably three causes, would you say, Julie, of damp and mould?
Yeah, absolutely.
About the difference then.
Yeah, so you've got penetrating damp, rising damp, and condensation. So condensation really is exactly what it says on the tin. It's created in the inside of the property and is usually, but not always, to do with tenant lifestyle. And that is the amount of moisture inside a property, then literally sticking to the cold surfaces in a house, creating water and then running down, or you see it on kitchen worktops, etc. Usually caused by people drying their clothes indoors and just not ventilating the property. Then you've got rising damp, and that's exactly what it says on the tin. That is water rising from the ground through the property. Sometimes, or usually, this is because the property is older and the bricks or the construction is more porous, and that drags the water up. And you will see this if there's no damp-proof course in a property or that has broken down. And again, the evidence of that on the walls will be, it will only come up to a certain height, usually about waist height or a metre, and you'll see that on the walls as almost like a salt or powder on the walls, which is quite white. Penetrating damp, again, that is obviously water coming in from external sources. Usually if you've got, say, a a leak in the gutter or gable end or something like that, and you'll see that coming into the property. Those two particularly would be landlord's responsibility. Condensation would actually be the tenant.
That's great, thanks, Julie. Because I think it's quite a common question that we get, isn't it? Is who's responsible for what? So that's a really helpful way of thinking about it. If it's the building that's at fault, it's the landlord. If it's the tenant that's the cause, then obviously it's the tenant. Not always that straightforward though. What about the situation then? Say you had a property with a bathroom, and the bathroom didn't have any windows or extractor fans. That's obviously going to generate a lot of damp and condensation, isn't it? Is that the tenant's fault? They can't get rid of that?
No, absolutely not. It's not the tenant's fault. But again, it's all about managing that and a little bit of common sense thrown in as well. A lot of the new builds that we see for some reason are built like this, where the bathroom tends to be in the middle of the property, so there are no ways of ventilating. But landlords can invest either in dehumidifiers, and tenants can be a bit more mindful when they have a shower or a bath, leave the bathroom door open so it's able to, expel the steam rather than leaving it confined into the bathroom. And you can also get extractor fans fitted through the walls if you've got an external wall, but that's not always possible if it is an internal bathroom.
That's great, thank you. So a lot of it really, I think, is about education's maybe too strong a word, but helping tenants understand how they can manage the property better, how they can try and avoid some of these problems. What about then, say we had a situation where an agent is receiving a complaint about damp or mold at a property. How are they going to decide? What's the best way for them to decide or work out where the problem lies? Are they expected to be experts about that?
Not experts possibly, but definitely to go down and visit and try and assess. Usually it'll end up with an expert coming down to define exactly what it is, but there are things, they have to check, are there trickle vents in the windows, in the double glazing. That's been the problem really, that over the years we've been too good at putting things like double glazing in, stopping the drafts in the house, because it's all about ventilation and insulation really. I think ventilation, insulation, and then education. So the three goes together, I think. And then so really with the other things you can do are possibly do if there are fans in the bathroom, don't have them just with a run on, have them with a humidistat attached, so it keeps dragging the moisture out until the moisture is gone. I know that for example in the Welsh legislation now, they're actually viewing, even if it's lifestyle, that it could well be down to the landlord to actually cure that lifestyle problem by putting in mechanical ventilation. And there's a lot of that around. There's heat recovery fans are probably the favorite. And I know in Wales, the social housing have put heat recovery fans in just about everywhere. Sucks the moisture out, warms it up, dries it, puts it back in, and then it keeps the wall from reaching what used to be called the dew point, where it's a temperature where the moisture would sit. So in danger of getting too in depth here, and we are not experts on specifically damp, but sometimes you have to have the expert in to define it. So and sometimes it looks like it's lifestyle, but there is it's not possible for the tenant's lifestyle to change to cure it. So I think in Wales we have to be very careful, because even if it's lifestyle, I believe the new Fit for Habitation Act from December will make us take action anyway. All right. So it's very specific to Wales.
Advice seems to be the moral of the story if an agent isn't sure. And just coming back to obviously what's been in the news recently, if we were a letting agent and we've done our inspection, we've got an expert come out and do a report for us, and it appears that the problem is the property, not the tenant. What about an agent who's telling their landlord, look, this is the problem, this is what you need to fix, you need to do something about this because it needs curing? Where's an agent left if their landlord is refusing to do that, or doesn't want to incur expense to put that right?
Well, there are difficulties then, because as an agent we are contracted to the landlord, so we're supposed to take his word on what to do. However, we don't have to take it if he's what he's saying is actually bad for him and the tenant. There's a duty of care to the tenant. Many times what agents will do will be to actually disinstruct. It doesn't help the tenant at all. But and I can see that more in Wales when they're more at risk if the landlord's not fulfilling his obligations. Then a lot of agents will disinstruct for fear of the penalties under the Fit for Habitation Act, which is stronger in Wales than England, and they can drag them in. So otherwise, up until now, there's not been retaliatory eviction, because the other alternative is that the landlord may want to evict the tenant if it's possibly their lifestyle. But from the 1st of December, yes, retaliatory eviction processes are coming to Wales. Unlike in England, they can bring them up at the last minute in court and do not require the council to help with HFIS. I suppose it would be that the next step for the tenant would be to go to the local authority. And then we'll end up with enforcement orders, etc.
So maybe
I think I'd follow on from that. Sorry, Mike. I think I'd follow on from that. As agents, we need to remember that we are the property professional here. Landlords may not know it all. That's why they've come to you as the professional. It is your duty as to your client, your landlord, to make them fully aware of the consequences of not doing the work. And there's nothing stopping you if a landlord is just absolutely not going to move forward with that work, taking the chance yourself to report them to the council. Never be afraid to do that, because at the end of the day, you still have, as Dale said, a duty of care to that tenant, as well as a loyalty to your client, the landlord.
Yeah, that's good advice.
That's one thing we forget all the time as agents, I think, and the agents that will survive will add to their service. They're basically risk managers for the landlords. Definitely, there's a lot of risk management. We're running with the legislation out there at the moment. We're in danger of just getting tied into the risk management. We obviously give some customer service to the landlord, but I think we're also forgetting that we are employed to give a degree of customer service to the landlord's customers, the tenants. And I think the agents that add that seriously to their service will survive much better in the future. And this is part of it.
All right. Well, that interesting talk about condition of properties may be a good point then to sort of segue into an update about the white paper. Here we're talking about the Renters Reform Bill. So the latest position on this, Rishi Sunak, our new Prime Minister, has underlined his commitment to bring in the Renters Reform Bill promises. He's said that the government intends to do that in the next parliamentary session, so that means before spring 2024, but we all know how long it takes to get law through Parliament, so I think it's probably fair to say that it needs to be starting its journey through the House of Commons before spring next year, because we're probably looking at least a year for that legislation to get through both houses before it becomes law. So there is a bit of time to go. Julie, how are agents reacting when they phone in on our helpline? Are they scared about this, or are they philosophical?
No, absolutely. There is a general sort of fear and panic out there, and I think the media doesn't help that, because the headlines on most of the media that we have out there is this white paper sort of, as soon as it was announced and released, it became law, which obviously it hasn't, as you've just alluded to. It's going to take some while to actually get it through Parliament. The parliamentary process isn't that swift, and sometimes when it suits Parliament, it moves at a glacial pace. But yeah, we are seeing a lot of confusion. A lot of agents still wondering if they can use a Section 21, or has that already been abolished? And obviously where we stand with these periodic tenancies that they're talking about as well, that's another one that is causing a lot of fear and confusion throughout the industry.
Yeah, okay. So I think really then the practical advice, or the comfort or reassurance that we can give agents, is to say this isn't going to, well, it's not your law yet, as you say, Julie, but it's not going to come in overnight. There will be a lead time before it happens. And a lot of the changes that they're talking about will also need to have some transition periods to get us from where we are now to where the new law wants us to be. So I think I would say to people, don't don't panic. Try not to be too alarmed that everything's suddenly going to change overnight, because it won't. And we'll be keeping a close eye on the bill as it makes its way through Parliament, and we'll be issuing regular updates, regular guides to agents as we see that move on. There are some more common changes that are happening sooner rather than later, of course. So we've got some changes coming up on smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Julie, just want to give us a bit of an update on the position in England, and then Dale cover Wales.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we already had the smoke and carbon monoxide regulation of 2015. We all knew that we had to have a smoke alarm and a CO detector in the property. The regulations were updated, so they're exactly the same regulations, just with some tweaks and updates. And we've now got that came into force on the 1st of October this year. And it means that you now need a CO carbon monoxide detector in any room with a combustible supply, and that includes boilers. Now, previously the legislation had excluded boilers, but now when you've got a boiler, even if it's a combi boiler, you need your CO detector in the room. Now, also where to place these, make sure it's in the room directly with the combustible appliance. I have heard some people putting them on the doors outside. Not good enough. It needs to be in the room. And we have heard of gas certificates failing because the CO detectors aren't in the correct place. But realistically, not a lot of change, but it's just to be mindful to make sure you've got them in the right place and you're up to date with these new legislations. But the one thing that is excluded from these legislations is gas cookers. If you've got only a gas cooker in your kitchen and no boiler, you do not need a CO detector. However, Dale is about to tell you something different.
Yes, that's what leads into the Welsh legislation. So that is not actually in yet, but on the 1st of next month, 1st of December, it will be coming in as part of the new act. And yeah, in Wales, there's no exclusion for gas cookers. So if there's a gas cooker in the kitchen on its own, carbon monoxide detector. If the gas boiler is elsewhere in the house, another carbon monoxide detector. So we must remember that there is a definite difference there. And then I made a few little notes here, actually, because the newest will come up. So more complex in Wales now. When the new act comes in on the 1st of December, from that point for existing tenancies, the landlords will have 1 year to install the smoke detectors, but different from England where batteries are still allowed. In Wales, they have to be electrically linked and linked to each other. So would have to be, that's 1 year. If their contract fixed term ends within that 1 year, well, and they're about to relet it, any new lets immediately have to have the electrically linked, powered and linked and mains. That's right. Yes. Yeah. So that's for there. But carbon monoxide has to be in on the 1st of December. And in Wales, if it's not, it will give the tenants the right not to pay rent. So it's. I know that as we speak, we've had quite a few phone calls from agents driving around with boots full of carbon monoxide detectors, if they can get them, indeed. So it's by the 1st. It has to be in by the 1st. The smoke detectors, you have a year for the existing tenancies. But that's the main differences in Wales, I think. And of course, in Wales, you do have to put carbon monoxide, whatever the combustion is. It could be oil. You'll have to have carbon monoxide by the oil boilers as well. So, and what Julie said was very interesting. Definitely, you would look at the legislation and think that maybe the carbon monoxide detector, if you've got an integral garage and the boiler's in the garage, they sometimes suggested to be on the door that links the garage to the house. That's okay, but if you've got a bathroom and you've got the boiler in the bathroom, we have seen people saying, oh, well, the condensation is going to set that carbon monoxide off. Let's put it just outside the door, and the gas safety certificate has subsequently failed. So that's an example.
All right, lovely, nice update, thank you. So just to comment on that, we issue lots of guides and templates, Q&A type documents in HFIS. So we have got these guides available for these changes coming into smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. We're also just updating our guidance on damp and mold because of recent events as well. So lots of good information available on our HFIS members area. Just continuing the topical theme then, cost of living, bills, inclusive tenancies. We've been getting a lot of calls about these, Julie, haven't we?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the cost of living and obviously the energy crisis that we're going through at the moment is having an impact on everybody. It's quite all encompassing. If you look at the search engines with regards to people looking for rental property, bills included is the highest search criteria that tenants are looking for at the moment. But obviously we are seeing the other side of that, and a lot of landlords wanting to remove that responsibility from themselves. So where do you really stand? It's hard to say realistically what a landlord can do. If they've already got a tenancy where bills are included, 9 times out of 10 these are HMOs, you can't change that tenancy. Even if it's gone on to a periodic, that tenant is still entitled to the terms of the original agreement that they signed. The only way that landlord can change this is if they do it as new tenants move in, so they change the terms for the tenants as they move in individually, and they're signing new ASTs, so therefore new terms. But then how do you manage that when you've still got tenants in there that are inclusive of bills? And you've also got the issue of how do you divvy that up? Realistically, if you've got 4 tenants in an HMO, as the bill comes in, divide it into 4, and that's how they should be bills included. But if you've got 4 sharers in an HMO and you want them to pay the bill, your utility companies and your council tax will only have 1 person named on the bill. So how do you make sure all of those tenants pay the bill that they should be entitled to? And then the arguments start, well, John uses more internet than I do. Sharon spends longer in the bathroom than I do. It creates a lot of problems. I would say for bills included, it's better for landlords to keep hold of that responsibility, but increase the rent accordingly, you know, and also be mindful that there are regulations out there that stop you charging more than what you're being charged by the supplier. It's called the Resale of Fuel Act. And what you're supposed to be doing is looking at how much you're getting charged by the supplier every month. Let's say it's £100 a month for gas and electric. You can only charge that back to the tenants. You can't be charging them 150, 250, because then you've got a bit of a buffer. You must only be charging exactly what you're being charged. But I think we are going to see more and more of this as we move forward, especially with the budget that we had just announced. The cost of living is going to be a huge issue in the private rented sector, and agents need to be aware of what's out there to support tenants who might be struggling.
Lovely, thank you.
Interesting. Mike, we actually had one landlady asking if she could add £2 per month for the people in her HMO if they were using PlayStations.
Oh, really?
Yes. But it's actually got down to that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, though, isn't it? I think, you know, working on the lettings helpline, we've never quite seen it all, have we? There's always a new twist or a new scenario coming across the desk. Just a quick couple of words on right to rent then, Judy. Just give us a quick summary of where we're at now with right to rent.
Oh my goodness, right to rent, my favourite subject. So thankfully, all the COVID regulations have now been lifted, and as of the 1st of October, we're back to a more sensible way of doing our right to rent. As everybody knows, under the Immigration Act 2014, you must carry out right to rent checks on anybody over the age of 18 that's going to be living in a property. Now, this includes permitted occupiers, so it's really important to remember, just because someone's not being named as a tenant, they still must have the right to rent check. Now, we can do a right to rent check in 3 ways. The first way is the old-fashioned way. The person physically comes into your office, physically brings the document, you look at the 2 and go, yeah, you're the same person. Take a photocopy of that document, sign it and date it, keep it for your records. That's the right to rent check done. The second way, and a little bit more complicated, is a new system that the government has invented. Now, I need to read my notes to get this right. And it's an IDVT, which is an Identification Document Validation Technology. Not easy to say. And that is actually a collaboration between DBS, that carries out your criminal record checks, and the Digital Culture, Media, Sports Department of the government. I know, right? So they have come together and they will actually be delivering this service. So you'll need to contact one of the approved IDVTs and they will basically do all the work for you, a bit like you do with your referencing companies now for everything else. And then finally, we have got the share code. So basically that means a tenant can go onto the Home Office website, set up their own little account, and that provides them with a share code. They then need to give you the share code and their date of birth. You log on to your portal, put their date of birth and their share code in, and that brings up everything on the screen that you need to know. Now, the one question that we get all the time is, what do we do with people who are born and bred in the UK, never left, don't have a passport? Can you write to rent check them? Yeah, absolutely. If they're born and bred in the UK, it's much easier. You don't need to do the 3 of the above, but you do need to have something that proves they were born here. So birth certificate, driving license, letter from an organisation like, say, DWP or their national insurance or something like that that can prove that they live, born, work in the UK. That will automatically give them the right to rent.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julie.
But always remember that in Wales, the right to rent is not enforced. So Wales and Scotland, I believe, at the moment, and that was basically because of a case that went through some time ago where the act itself was deemed to be discriminatory. It actually was deemed by, I think, Justice Spencer. Justice Spencer actually deemed it to be not only discriminatory, but would force landlords who would otherwise not be discriminatory to discriminate. So it was a heck of a judgment. He said it breached the Equalities Act and the human rights. I know that's been appealed, but I don't see it coming back into Wales anytime soon.
Great. Okay. Well, that's great. I mean, really useful overview there of the typical topical inquiries that we get through the helpline. But also just highlighting the importance of the difference between England and Wales, and we've got 2 great experts in Julie and Dale, who can cover both of those topics quite nicely. So talking of questions, just seen a couple of questions that have come up. Will we be sent a copy of the recording? Yes, everybody that's registered for the webinar will get a copy of the recording after the event. We'll try to answer as many questions as we go along the session today. Any questions we don't get to, we'll answer by email after the webinar for everybody. So a couple of questions that we've had already then. This is a question from Mark. A tenant's refusing access for us to carry out our midterm inspection, but we're managing the property, we've got the keys. Can we just let ourselves in and do what we need to do? There is a one-word answer to that, but give us a little bit more of a more reasoned explanation, Julie or Dale.
Yeah, hi. Absolutely. That one word is no. Very simply, the tenant has the right to exclude everybody. So when we give an AST, we give exclusive possession of a property. That exclusive possession means they are allowed to exclude everybody, including the landlord and their agent. So even if you've given the obligatory 24 hours notice, which everybody thinks that's all they need to give in writing, if you haven't had express permission from the tenant that you can go in, then you cannot. Even if you've got a set of keys, you can't go in. Now, if it's an emergency or you need to make the property safe, that's different. You can do that. But again, I'd be mindful of how you do that. The only other way to gain access to a property is by a court order, and you can apply to court for what's called a warrant of entry. But whether it is worth that for a midterm inspection really is a business decision to be made.
That's right, perhaps gas safety certificates, but I don't think the gas injunctions have been heavily in the courts recently, but mostly through the social housing departments, taking people to court for a gas injunction. And but basically what it is, it's a legal conflict. To explain to your landlords is difficult. I think there's 2 ways of explaining to the landlords this. One is, yes, they'll find something in the old acts from before saying, yes, you've got the right to go into your property and effect repairs. But then the tenant's right to exclude trumps that. So there's no conflict. The tenant's right to exclude trumps everything. I think I've heard it explained before. Imagine if before we came on this seminar today, this webinar, we went downstairs, opened our curtains, looked into the front garden, and somebody had actually got a tent in the garden and they're living on it. What can you do? Well, everybody knows they're trespassing. You phone the police. It's exactly the same for the tenants. They open the curtains as well, and they see somebody in their garden camping out on their garden. They phone the police to class them as trespassers. Even if it's the landlord that's living in the tent on his own garden, he's now a trespasser on his own property and can be arrested. and there are heavily penalties with trespass, and it's always best not to go in unless you've got the permission, and you can't. Yeah.
Thank you. And just interestingly, a case that we've just dealt with in the property redress scheme, it involved a letting agent who let a property on a license. So we'd drawn up a document headed nicely license, and very clearly nice statements on it saying this is not a tenancy, this is a license agreement. And they let themselves into the property, and the tenant objected to it, and it ended up with the property redress scheme as a complaint. So what we decided in that case was this tenant had exclusive possession of the property. They had a front door with a key. There was nobody else in the property, them living there on their own. So calling it a license is not enough. In law, that still counts as a tenancy, and so our agent was wrong to enter the property. Interestingly, one of the things they said was, if it was a license, I wouldn't need their permission to go in. I'd only have to give them notice, which strictly speaking is right. They were correct. However, they couldn't say it was a license because it was an occupation with exclusive possession on the part of the tenant. So it's not necessarily what it says on the tin. It's the practical effect of what the relationship is between the parties.
Yes.
Just moving on then, our next question here was, a tenant wants to add her boyfriend to the tenants. What's the best way to do this? We get lots of queries about people coming and going during tenancies, don't we? What would you say, Dale?
Oh, well, 1 second, bit of tech problem. Okay, well, basically, you've got to consider the future, isn't it? This is where we become almost social workers. How long is this relationship going to last is the question. Do we actually advise the tenant? Perhaps we put her, the boyfriend, on as maybe a permitted occupier with no rights to the tenancy until she's sure, or until maybe the next renewal date, or sometime in the future, so she retains the right to kick him out if she doesn't like him anymore. So because otherwise, if we make him a tenant, probably the only satisfactory way of achieving this would be for him to surrender his tenancy. We re-grant she surrenders her tenancy, sorry, re-grant the joint tenancy on the same day, which then gives him tenants' rights as well. Not easy to get out of the relationship, and it does tend to sort of be a problem later. But then we've got the other things. We've got the surrender, the re-grant of the tenancy. How do you handle the deposit? Do we actually, luckily, most of the deposit schemes are quite familiar with the surrender and re-grant concept. So as long as they both agree that it's a joint deposit, or one is the lead tenant, etc., they will sort that out for them. But then the other thing is, okay, what about the inventory? She's been living there for a while. I know there's definitely going to be a bit more wear and tear when he gets there, in my experience. So with the inventory, you can get the boyfriend to sign to say he accepts the original inventory. So there's no messing around. Don't have to do new inventory at all. And then at the end, there are no problems. But obviously, don't forget, extra wear and tear. They may need to renegotiate the rent. But by far, the best thing, I think, Julie probably agree as well, is to try first of all put him on as a permitted occupier, and to see how it goes in the beginning. Yeah, I think that's the route we normally take.
So communicate is a key, and document it in whichever way you deem to be the right way, depending on what the future of that tenancy is. Where we see it
as well, because we're getting into people's relationships then as well, so it's got to be a bit delicate. Yeah, I know.
But where we see it go wrong, I think time and time again in PRS certainly, is where people don't talk enough about what's going on, and they don't document what's changed.
Yes.
Okay, our next question here then, we're going to move on to our Q&A session here now. So thank you for all of you that have been busy putting some questions through on the portal. I'm just going to have a look at these and pick out the ones that we think are going to be most interesting for most of you. But as I say, if we don't answer all of the questions, we will be following those up by email. So I've got a tenant with 3 external facing walls and they're seeing mold growing on their inside walls. It's very cold in the room. What's the best way for me to approach this one?
I'll take that one if that's okay, Dale.
Yes, yeah.
I would say the first thing to look at is the EPC, because you need to know the structure of the property, and then also what work the landlord may be able to do. I'd be going in there, doing a bit of an inspection and a chat with the tenant, looking at, you know, what are they doing? Is there something going on in their lifestyle? That would be my first look. But most definitely look at getting a damp specialist in to have a look at that, a proper damp surveyor. Now, a lot of these damp companies do go out and do these first off inspections for free, so look out for those. But that would be my first look, to actually find the cause of the damp. Once you know the cause of the damp, it's much easier to try and bring in the remedies. But 3 external walls is going to be an issue, depending on where the property is in the UK. If it's coastal, for example, it's very possible that it could be a single skin property, and there may not be a lot that can be done. So it's then working with the tenant to see how you can improve the situation that they're in with more manual options such as dehumidifiers or something like that.
Right, thanks.
The external wall suggests that possibly you can drop a heat recovery fan in there as well, which would help. But and I see that in a lot of the HMO buildings where they've got the back rooms, which are 3 external walls. The fire doors now stop the ventilation by closing behind them. They're not going to open the windows because it's cold. Sometimes they're drying their wetsuits on the radiators, etc. So it is lifestyle. So I think it's heating, insulation, ventilation, education is
back communication again, isn't it?
Hive. Yes.
So we've got a question here from Caro, I think it is. What's your advice regarding the energy rebate in relation to HMOs?
I think it depends on who's actually paying the bills, first of all. Is he thinking that possibly the bills are inclusive? Now I think didn't you, Julie, see something the other day about the possibility of them getting the rebate? Because,
yeah, absolutely. So the way the legislation is set out at the moment, it's the bill payer that gets the rebate, and it's the £400 rebate, which normally is split over £66 over a certain period of time until you've exhausted the £400. Now, where you've got bills included, that will automatically be credited to the landlord's bill. And it goes back to what I said earlier, the landlord needs to be sure that the amount that he's charging the tenants isn't more than he's being charged by the utility companies. So if that £66 a month comes in and brings him below what he's charging the tenants, then we need to see the landlords crediting that back to the tenants. Now, the way that can be done is by a rent reduction. So if you've got 4 tenants in an HMO, split that £66, divide it by 4, give them all that off their rent. It's the easiest way to do it, but you can't just be having the £66 off your bill every month and pocketing the difference. Now, realistically, what we have seen from the calculations is that £66 a month isn't actually making a huge amount of difference to the amount of money that landlords are seeing as a difference. So it's quite possible that 66 won't make a dent in that. But if it is a property where the tenant's paying their own bill, then absolutely it will be credited directly to the bill payer, and the tenant should be seeing that come off their bill every month as well.
Yes. Yeah, agree.
Just developing that a little bit further then, another question here. Where's it gone? We manage student tenancies with bills included in the rent. Does the tenancy agreement need to show the exact amount allocated to bills for each tenant, or can it just say the amount of the rent and say this includes all bills?
Right, that is a fantastic question and really poignant, actually. Yes and no is the answer to that. So there's no legal requirement for you to break down the bills that you're including in the rent. However, if you then later down the line need to increase the bill element of the rent, you can only do that if you have it broken down into your tenancy agreement. So realistically, if you want to be able to increase the bills, yes, it needs to be broken down into your tenancy agreement exactly what tenants are paying. If you just intend to increase the rent as a whole later down the line, then you don't need to detail it.
That's right, and that's all highlighted actually on our guide that was being put out, the cost of living guide on the site. Which gives them handy clauses as well to incorporate it into the tenancy agreements to specifically achieve that end. Yeah. that I noticed. Yeah.
Okay. Next question here, which I'll take. You briefly touched on what happens if you don't have authority to go into property to do a gas certificate. What can you do so you're not in trouble for not having a gas certificate? This comes back to taking all reasonable steps, so making not just one attempt to be able to go into the property, you know, try 2, 3, 4 times maybe. Explain to the tenant and document that you've explained to the tenant what the importance is of having to go into the property, so that they're aware of the implications, and purely at a practical level explain to them that this is for your safety. It's not us being difficult, it's not red tape. Gas safety certificates are there for a very good health and safety reason. If you're still facing a situation where a tenant won't let you in, make sure you've documented in your file, in your property records, the steps that you've taken, because we have seen that our authorities are taking a reasonable approach to this. They don't expect you to perform the impossible, but they do expect you to have, you know, made reasonable efforts, and to show you've made reasonable efforts, that comes back to documenting what you've done and the steps you've taken. So you're not going to be hauled coals for not performing the impossible. Make sure as well, though, that you've also explained to your landlord, you know, we've done everything we can to do this, short of, as we said earlier, taking legal action to get an injunction, which is probably a step too far for most landlords.
Yes.
Okay.
But always worth on the end of that, always worth phoning up the local authority and telling them the difficulties you're having, so that they can log it as an extra bit of evidence that you're trying your best.
Good tip.
So,
yeah,
okay. Definitely.
Good stuff. Okay, well, I can see we've got quite a few more questions here than we're going to be able to answer today, but as I say, we will answer them all by email directly with all of you after the session. I just wanted to move on then, just to talk a little bit about HFIS, who we are, what we do. So other helplines are available. We're not the only letting agent helpline that exists, but a couple of things I would say about our helpline. One of them is very, very easy to get through, very approachable. We do our live chat by telephone, by email, and via the website as well. Live chat is really popular with our inquirers, because you can download a copy of the conversation and the advice that's been given, so that's nice to take and keep on your file. And Julie and Dale, would you say we get more advice inquiries by live chat than we do by phone?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say it's the most popular element, and I think it's more popular because whereas when you're on the phone, if you've got somebody in your office, sometimes it can be a bit distracting to be on the phone and talking to that person. But if you've got someone in your office and you're on live chat kind of in the corner, out the corner of your eye, you can sound a little bit more professional as well, coming back with all the answers that we're giving you hand-fed there on the live chat.
Yeah, that just happens, doesn't it?
Yeah. And we, to the best of our knowledge, best of how we can measure, we are the only helpline that does do this live chat advice, so it's a big plus for us. We touched earlier about being part of the Hamilton Fraser group, so that's great because it does give us access to a lot of other expertise that we can use to help you. The other thing I think it's important to say, and hopefully you've seen that today, is that we're not just giving textbook answers. We know that there's some helplines out there where you speak to, you know, a law graduate who can give you a very good legal answer to your problem, but it's not based on experience. It's not based on having done the job, managed properties, been a letting agent in the past. We offer 2 types of membership for HFIS. We have a standard membership, which is our advice, as we've said, during normal business hours, 9 to 5:30, Monday to Friday. That's available for £10 a month plus VAT, so really not a lot of money at all. Most of our members, the vast majority, are going for our premium membership, so that's our letting agent helpline plus the extras. So one of the extras is that there is also a 24/7 legal helpline. and that's not limited to lettings issues. That's really any aspects of running your business. So we know that we've had some calls go through to that to deal with hire cars, photocopier leasing. You know, somebody's opened a smelly cafe next to my office, it's putting customers off. What do I do? So really good wide ranging advice there on running your business. The really big plus point of the premium membership is our online resources. So we have a members area with document templates, legal guides, legal updates. Two documents that, you know, really go off the shelves like hot rock cakes are the tenancy agreement template that we have for ASPs. There's a holding deposit agreement template, and also our management terms of business, so contract between landlord and agent. Julie, are we seeing a problem with people not having enough of this, you know, documentation in place?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. To me, on a daily basis, I am sometimes a little bit shocked that there isn't the right documentation in place or enough, or I'm seeing documents that are acquired off the internet for free and are not necessarily correct when it comes to legislation. The most popular one seems to be a tenancy agreement that is downloaded from Queensland in Australia. For some reason, it comes up top of the search engine, and obviously Australian law does not meet our own. The other issue you have is the law changes constantly within the private rented sector, and it is a minefield. We currently have, and it probably could change by the end of this webinar, 168 laws and 402 regulations, and you need to make sure your documents are up to speed. Using a tenancy agreement that you may have been using 5 years ago is not going to be fit for purpose today. Same with your terms of business. You need to be mindful of consumer protection regulations. It isn't just about letting agency. Your customers are there to be protected as well. So you need to be mindful of that when you're getting your documents drawn up too.
Brilliant. Okay. So just finishing on our premium membership, then £20 a month for these extra bits, which are really useful, but also some discounts of the other products that are available through Hamilton Fraser. So client money protection, my deposits, deposit protection, property redress scheme, landlord action. We can help our premium members get access to those services at a lower cost. We've touched on the next slide, so forgive me if I just pass through that, because I think we've covered most of that already. The only thing I would say, it's interesting actually that most of our members that join HF Assist are joining us on the premium membership on a monthly direct debit, £20 per month. That seems to be the most popular way for people. And also interestingly, probably about 3/4 of the letting agents who join us are coming through the property redress scheme as well. And some of the feedback that we're starting to get from them is it's a great complement to that. You know, I've got access to the advice to hopefully not get things go wrong, but where it does go wrong, you know, I've also got that property redress scheme to help me out and make some decisions that are practical and reasonable. So we're just counting down on time a little bit now. I've just put on the last slide there our contact details. We've also given you there a discount code. So if you join HF Assist, and you can join it very quickly and easily online, it only takes a couple of minutes. But if you do that before 31st of December, use that discount code surgery10, and we'll give you 10% discount on the price that you see on the HF Assist subscription. Okay, I can see just while we were running through that, then we've had another load of questions come in. So really good number of questions from everybody. Thank you for those. I'm just going to pick up on one before we close, because I thought this was particularly interesting. Where are you left with a section 21 if you don't have a continuous set of gas safety certificates? You know, we've done all the right things, tried to get into the property, but our tenant won't let us. So we have a break in the gas safety certificates. Does that stop me being able to issue a section 21?
Which country as well?
We're going to look at England.
Well.
Let's stick with England.
All right. So yeah, possibly Julie for England.
Yeah, so the gas certificate regulations are really quite strict when it comes to having your gas certificates in place. So the legislation, which is the Gas Safety Act of 1988, that clearly states that you need a gas certificate in place. Now, this was then added to by the Deregulation Act and obviously the Prescribed Information Regulations of 2015, which clearly stated that gas certificates need to be continuous, so there's no break between the gas certificates, and it is very, very possible that if you have a section 21 and you haven't had your continual gas certificates done, that your section 21 would be invalid. The key here is when the gas certificate was done in comparison to when the tenancy agreement was signed. So if you had a gap between an expiring tenancy and a new tenancy being signed, but when that new tenancy was signed, you had a valid gas certificate, you could well be okay. But if you let that move on to a statutory periodic and you hadn't had the gas certificate done in the right place, it could fail your section 21.
Yeah, okay.
That's right. And obviously, if there was not a gas safety done when somebody moved in either country, if there was no gas safety in place, the tenant moved in. For example, one the other day, the gas safety ran out the day before the tenancy started, the tenant moved in, and the gas safety was done the day after, you will never get back the right to the section 21.
Yeah,
that's one definitive, at least, in the thing. But I have spoken to several of the landlord action guys, and they have been working with giving best evidence that they've tried to get the gas safety done, and apparently with some success. It depends on the gap between them, I think, if it's reasonable. Yeah,
exactly. Back to reasonable endeavours, reasonable attempts, but also, as we said, just keep that audit trail of documents going as well. Okay, great stuff. Okay, so lots and lots of questions, as I say. Thank you so much for all of those, because it's really, really great to see them. We will answer all the ones that we haven't answered today. Just bringing things to a close then, I'm very flattered to see a comment that somebody has left on the website here, which is, I would like to say, all of my dealings with Julie and Dale have been exceptional. Thank you for such a great helpline. So that's very kind of that person.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mum.
I can.
Your check's in the post. Thank you.
That's right.
I certainly echo that in terms of the expertise that Dale and Julie have got. So we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you obviously to Julie and Dale for our expert panel. I'll leave that slide up here so that you can just obviously see those contact details, know where to go for more information. But as I say, we will contact all of you after the webinar with a copy of the slides, a copy of the recording, and any questions that we haven't already answered. So thank you very much, everybody, and look forward to speaking to you on the next webinar, if not before. Thanks and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.